Oh, there was no doubt we were living through a revolution. I certainly experienced it as such, internalized it in that way. When the paper by Avery, McLeod, and McCarty came along, I didn't use the phraseology, but my exclamations were equivalent, saying this is the dawn of molecular genetics. Because for the first time we could have a biological assay for the genetic activity of an external molecule. So that publication, next to Francis Ryan, were the molding effects on my career. Was talked about quite extensively around the department at Columbia. It turns out we had a couple of people who were important liaison. Alfred Mirsky, who has been remarked on as having been an inappropriate critic of Avery, McLeod, and McCarty. I don't think it was inappropriate, but it was certainly a severe critic. Was also the greatest herald of the story, so we would hear about what was going on at the Rockefeller Institute on the other side of town as if we had been at the same institution. But also Harriet Taylor was a graduate student working with L.C. Dunn, had become interested in it as well, and she in fact went to do postdoctoral work in Avery's laboratory shortly after that time. So we had very close information linkages to the research that was going on there. We were very well informed about it. We reacted to it. There was a lot of critical dialectic, but it was not something that could be ignored. It was the most exciting thing that had happened in many, many decades, and was precisely because it was so important, that is, the identification of DNA as genetic material, that I empathize with the view that it should be subjected to the most critical examination. It was too important an issue to just accept casually. So as long as the debate was alive, that was the way the scientific method operates.
Run into the tunnel. You have to go as fast as you can. You can trust me. It's real. It's real. Full speed, Kevin.
It's literally turning into worst case
the latest
scenario.
data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case
turning
scenario.
into worst
I'm
case
afraid
scenario.
that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with
Literally
essentially a
turning
worst
into
case
worst
scenario.
case scenario.
I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're
literally
dealing
turning
with
into
essentially a
worst
worst
case
case
scenario.
scenario. I'm afraid that the latest data
literally
tells us that
turning
we're
into
dealing with
worst case
essentially a
scenario.
worst case scenario. I'm afraid that the latest
literally
data
turning into
tells us that
worst.
we're
Don't trouble the water. I won't give it up. Why don't you let it be? Still water run deep. Yes, it do. I know that. Oh, yeah. If you only believe.
I am really happy to be here this morning. Thank you very much for tolerating my less than optimal production here. Don't forget that one of the spectacular commitments that is required of all these actors is that they not question the fundamental principles of the pandemic that include the molecular tests, the various molecular tests that correlated with people that got sick. And that includes people like Ryan Cole, who have recently declared on Kim Iverson's podcast that indeed he's going to consider running for governor of Idaho. It's really very spectacular where we are, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy to have you here. I am going to complete this introduction with a little babble, and then we'll get started with the study hall. So yeah, it's once in a lifetime that we're going to get a chance to take the power back from these charlatans, not just these guys, but also these guys that have been standing in front of them, essentially, on the internet to try and bamboozle us about a mystery that we needed to solve and about what we should blame on the spike protein and what the spike protein of the virus. So the spike protein has a bad choice for transfection may be doing to our population. And this time it could be different if you just allow me to help you see through these charlatans and their acolytes on social media. I've got a lot of hope, ladies and gentlemen. Just like Brandy Vaughn, I've got a lot of hope that doctors can learn. I got a lot of hope that biologists can learn. Quite frankly, I don't think there's any hope of them not running across Gigaohm Biological and being faced with the important questions, the really important questions. Like, who are we really up against right now? Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Jonathan Couey. I am the chief biologist at Gigaohm Biological, coming to you live out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You can find my academic work on PubMed, and you can find lots of evidence of my continued learning through the pandemic. If Panda hadn't lost my 3 presentations, that would be great. If you didn't have to sort through hundreds and hundreds of hours of nonsense, the NCI might be a useful thing. The wellness company's got lots of things to sell you that even come in fancy little zipper bags. Children's Health Defense, they'll take all your money, and they'll make really nice banners with it, and they'll sponsor really impressive seminars and weekend events where everybody comes and spends lots of money and nothing ever gets solved. They'll even publish lots of books, make lots of money on books. They publish all kinds of books because that's what they do. They actually, I guess, let me go because I don't sell books. I've given a really great presentation about this at the Red Pill Expo in 2024, and I'm working on some stuff with basketball and biology and a high school curriculum, a freshman biology curriculum that is going to help dispel this mythology. I'm really excited. If you want to support this work, please go to gigaohmbiological.com. Just went back from the tax office yesterday afternoon, and I'm not ashamed to report back. The taxes are submitted. They are paid, whatever you want to call it. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, is that, some people are making a great deal of money doing this, and some people are not. I'm one of those people that is surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, but unsuccessful at turning an internet streaming into a successful career upon which I can build, multi-generational wealth. It's not working out that way for me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jonathan Couey. I'm coming to you live out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This, I'm just going to say it. This haze looks a little suspicious, but I had lit a I had lit some. It's funny. I lit some incense and I let it go a little long. I probably should actually open the door because I think it's still actually settling, and so it might get smokier before it gets less than smoky. Oh, there we go. It's probably better. I noticed it was still going when I was running the intro, and I couldn't reach back there while I was advancing the slides. So anyway, it'll clear out in a minute. Yeah, so it is the 28th of March, 2025. I'm trying to keep a little more daily presence on the internet. I think it's really important right now to keep the pressure on these so-called truth tellers and these people who are coming to our rescue on white horses with white beards. We need to stay very, very, very focused on the biology, and that's what we're going to start with next week. I'm looking very forward to coaching you through the reorientation of your thinking about human biology and about, you know, all the biology around you, the biology of Earth, so to speak. And maybe that's part of the reason why I think Marvin the Martian is so funny, because, you know, he thinks of himself as he is an alien and Earth is somewhere else. And so we can talk about Earth's biology in that respect. And I think, you know, somebody like Joshua Lederberg used to think about Earth's biology and a possibility of there being biology outside of Earth, exobiology. It is remarkable where we are in 2025. I feel really blessed to be here. I just mentioned that we just recently got back from oh, look at those nice things, they're all working again. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I have not been invited to the Red Pill in July. It doesn't mean that I won't be. I did present again at the Red Pill virtually whenever it was the last time. I'm kind of pushing the first one because the first one is also very much feels very fresh. I said a lot of things that I was afraid to say at the time. I'm not afraid to say anymore. And it felt very much like I was daring to cross a line. Apparently it didn't matter, but that's why I pushed that Red Pill episode, or Red Pill in particular. I'm going to move these chats off of the screen for now. It is, again, Gigaohm Biological. The message that I'm bringing you is not a message for everyone, but it is a message for anyone. Anyone can understand this. Anyone can try to reorient the way that they think about social media, the way they think about their government and their perception of reality. And I think it's really, you know, one of my main messages is that we must reorient our understanding of reality relative to social media and relative to how our government uses social media and how weaponized piles of money in the private sector would use social media to manipulate us. If we don't reorient and come to a much better understanding of that and how it works, and how it can be used malevolently against us to make us believe almost anything, then the next generation, our children, will be enslaved by that illusion on social media that is created by our participation, our belief that, you know, a few minutes on X or a few minutes on Telegram or just checking a few, you know, Facebook posts is enough to stay up to date, and that there's nothing of manipulation happening there on a nationwide or even a global scale. It is not to be underestimated how the power of propaganda has gain of function in the sense of how it has expanded to a global reach, and therefore politics and political shows and mythological performances on American social media can have global implications, and vice versa. Mythological performances in Germany can have political implications and societal implications in America simply because of the hyperconnectivity of these people and the thoughts that are allowed to percolate through this hyperconnectivity. If the thing that percolates through the hyperconnectivity is a fear of the loss of airline travel, then the consciousness on Earth that is actively engaged in using social media will be thinking that collectively. And I don't think that there's any way to underestimate the power of that. So it's a tough one to swallow, because this is for all the marbles. The idea is that our grandchildren end up being grandfathered into that system where they just accept it because their parents accepted it, their parents being our kids. And we cannot allow this. One of the keys is getting off of the militarized social media control programs that are just called social media. That's the first and one of the first and foremost things to do. One of the other first and foremost things to do is to understand that the all-cause mortality in the United States is a complex but well understood phenomenon. There are no surprises in this because there's too much at stake. Too many trillions of dollars were at stake for them not to have known that there was an all-cause mortality rise expected to appear. And so we were going to have a preponderance of old people. And that problem, economically, socioeconomically, was serious. And in some countries, maybe even more serious than it is in the United States. Maybe in China, for example, or in Scotland, or in Germany, it might be even more serious than it is in America. Understand that. And that simple, anticipated rise in all-cause mortality seen coming for decades was sculpted using a little bit of murder and lies to create the illusion of a pandemic that can now be easily seen in retrospect as an anomaly that can't be explained by either a lab leak or a natural virus with some special HIV inserts or something like that, a fear and cleavage site. This is absurd. It's murder and lies. And that's why we find ourselves here trapped behind the Trump administration with this absurd performance going on, where these absurd characters are now in positions of power that they could lose at any moment, depending on whether they figure out who they follow on Twitter, or whether they're not they're alcoholics, or whether they know how to keep classified information classified. It's absurd right now what we're dealing with. And yet that's all going to be blamed on this Trump. Nobody's talking about the white-haired lady sitting next to Trump. And so while the murder and lies that were committed using pure oxygen in hospitals, committed under the guise of PCR tests being a useful diagnostic tool, and under the guise of antibiotics not being appropriate for a viral syndrome, here's the message of hope, that this is the end. This is all they got. There are no gain-of-function viruses. There's nothing that they can dump in a mud puddle somewhere in China and it can leak all over the world and they can make a spectacular mistake, or there's nothing they can spray in a bat cave under a DARPA grant that's going to result in this. It's just not possible. That's why a clown like Nathan Wolf has been busy so long as a virologist. I mean, it's absurd. And so here's the truth, as fast as I can say it, ladies and gentlemen. This illusion requires your participation to sustain. Transfection was a known methodology before the pandemic, and using it on healthy people would have been a crime before 2020. Declaring an emergency really didn't change that, except for in the legislative structure of America. RNA cannot pandemic, and there's lots and lots of biologists that could learn this on their own, could challenge themselves to prove and try to understand how it is that RNA could pandemic, even though DNA is supposed to have a lot of special properties that RNA does not have. And finally, intramuscular injection is dumb, I think, is a phrase that every doctor should sit down by themselves and think about deeply if they dare. And if they dare, I think they will find something very weird staring back at them in the mirror. Something like a, holy cow, I never thought about that before. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been saying it succinctly for more than 2 years. The best way to say it is that the U.S. vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. You can figure it out by comparing the U.S. vaccine schedule to any other vaccine schedule in the Western world. Ladies and gentlemen, people using and learning biology are starting to know better, starting to figure it out. And these people who did know better are starting to look like criminals, complicit in things. And I don't think that's a very good look. I'm going to bounce out of here for just a second. and see if I can fix that little goof there. There we go, and slideshow here. Yesterday, yesterday I showed a video of one Brandy Vaughn interviewing one Suzanne Humphries, MD, recently, who has been on Joe Rogan and The High Wire in the past few days, where she was interviewed at CalJam. And to summarize her statements, is Suzanne Humphries in 2018, who I will remind you had a book about polio, measles, and smallpox, and the history of the disappearance of those in relation to pesticides and clean water and sanitation. In 2013, this book came out. So 5 years later, she's talking to Brandy Vaughn, the Merck whistleblower, the person who says ingestion versus injection, and tries to teach people the biology of how dumb an intramuscular injection is. This doctor doesn't think there's any hope for other doctors. She aims her messages at parents, but in the same little conversation, she has advice for parents is to ask other parents. So she doesn't really want to help anybody. Her main message is parents should ask other parents. Then I guess they won't need doctors. I don't know. She advises parents to research both sides. And she gives very specific advice that you shouldn't give a needle to a sick kid. That's about as precise as Suzanne Humphries is in 2018, 5 years after writing a book, releasing her second book in this video. And we are now, how many years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years after this video, and she is on Joe Rogan for 2.5 hours. And she even says that, specifically, that Paul Offit claims that some mercury is better than other mercury. It's almost like we haven't moved at all in the whole time that Suzanne Humphries has had a stage, has had a website, has had a book, has had 2 books, has been on stage with and in a movie, 2 movies, and also been on stage with CHD at every conference they've ever done. I've shaken this person's hand. I honestly never dreamed that she was part of it, but I cannot come to any other conclusion given her lack of progress. It's an important thing. She says, well, it's more than just vaccines, it's also antibiotics. I need you to understand, ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason why I'm not going to stop with Brandy, because Brandy said it right when no one else would. When Suzanne Humphries wouldn't say it, Brandy said it right. When Polly wouldn't say it, Brandy said it right. When Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Judy Mikovits wouldn't say it right, Brandy said it right. The only person that's ever said it right consistently that I've ever found that makes it about the methodology, the injection versus ingestion, is Brandy Vaughn. And she made this argument for years in the presence of, as colleagues of, these other anti-vaxxers. And this is a gigantic red flag, bigger than any Denny's or truck stop American flag you've ever seen in your life. And she died in December of 2020 at the start of the pandemic when the murder was just starting. This is about something much bigger than profit. Brandy thought that it was all about profits and it was the pharmaceutical companies, and that is incorrect. The pharmaceutical companies are pawns in this, just like the governments are. This is a gigantic operation. It is a multinational operation that understands all the variables at play, including that there are homogeneous populations like the Indian population, or subpopulations of India, like the subpopulations of China, that have very usefully segregated themselves for a long time, essentially representing a kind of inbred mouse strain in humans, to be distinguished from other inbred mouse strains, like those really nice ones in Finland, There's some good ones in Norway, although they're getting mixed up quick. Same with Sweden. And so you see there is an imperative to collect the data as it stands, as it exists, before it never exists that way again. The only things disappearing from the world are not languages. They are also genealogies, whole data sets that could provide insight that would otherwise not be available were these variations in the genome expression, paradigm, pattern integrity not available for collection. Now, not in any way, shape, or form do I believe that they are prepared to collect the data that would be hypothetically necessary. Do I think that they are capable of building the computer network that would hypothetically be necessary? Nor do I think they are capable of interpreting the results. But, nevertheless, in a comic book, in a cartoon, in a one-page proposal, in a national security brief, this shit all sounds really good. And that's how the Human Genome Project has perpetuated itself for so many years under the guidance of people like Mark Lander and Francis Collins and these kinds of people who have understood the reality that when they declared that the Human Genome Project had been completed, that is nothing. What? No. That meant that they played one game of Go to the end. Now they needed to play billions of more games of Go. And yes, it's become cheaper and cheaper to sequence, but it still doesn't mean that they can produce a high fidelity, reliable catalog of your genes. It just means that they can do something that they can lie about. And it might have a lot of details. It might have a lot of details about proteins. It might have a lot of details about protein variants or enhancers or RNA regulation or any other details they claim to find. They will never find any details about the trajectory through time, the development of the adult animal, the adult human. They're never going to find that data. They're not even looking for it right now. They can't even conceive of the possibility of where this might be hidden. And so all they are really doing is perpetuating this idea that this is done, even though they still don't know what all the data is. They can talk smack about it in TED Talks, but they don't know what all the data is. They don't know if they have enough space to store it. They can't even conceive of the amount of storage space necessary. And then they got to connect all those hard drives to each other so that the machine learning algorithm can access all that data. Just try to imagine the server array that needs to hold all of the Chinese genomes combined with all of the Chinese medical data, and then how you design a machine learning program in a computer that can what are we talking about here? I'm not saying that these are inconceivable solutions, that people couldn't solve these problems. I'm suggesting to you that none of these problems are capable of being solved with the existing hardware, with the existing data arrays, with the existing internet. It's not like that. They don't even know what all the data is. And finally, they need to validate the predictions that are made. See, they tried to do that a long time ago when they were going to cure genetic diseases by transfecting people with the protein they were missing. And what happened? Right? That just ended in the early 2000s. It was just over because it's a failure. It doesn't work. And so part of their assumptions of the Human Genome Project was that it would work. Do you see? That's not a small failure. That's a gigantic failure. It's not a small setback. That's a gigantic setback. But they're just going on like they already know what all the data is. They're already storing it. See, they have it at 23andMe. We've got to worry about like 18 million genomes being lost. That data is useless. I mean, is it useless for mapping and making landmark studies of the human genome? Probably not. But it's useless for this imaginary thing where they're going to crack the building code and we're going to start pre-programming our kids to be smart and fast and beautiful. That's ridiculous. And that's why these people were put in place. That's why they all have connections to the Human Genome Project, to this genome screening, to clinical diagnostics, to using genes to diagnose diseases. They all have that in their background. All of them have that, or they have that this interesting anti-vax position that was never, never has evolved to understanding intramuscular injection. The methodology itself is being flawed. That's the two kinds of people you find on this picture. That's it. Either they were associated with big pharma, they were associated with big genome, or they were associated with big diagnostic, or they were associated with virology and public health. That's it. They were all there. None of these people were minding their own business at the beginning of the pandemic and then just threw everything to the wind to try and get the word out. And even after they learned the truth, they never did that. That's what you need to see. That's how dark this is. It is not pretty, and it's not a fun message, but it's real, because transfection needed to be absolved of any of this, and that's why it's still ongoing. That's why the Scooby-Doo and the acceptance of the gain-of-function virus would maybe more dangerous than we thought is so important, because then the spike protein.
So this is real. The
confused.
Trump administration just nominated Dr. Susan
First, I want to point out a couple things. What I said back here, I'm going to go back. Sorry. Let me just go back.
Nora.
So it's all about the Human Genome Project. And what I'm making the argument is they don't even know what all the data is. They don't even know how much storage space they need, but they know they need a shit ton, excuse my language. It all needs to be accessible. That means they need a lot better networks than they have right now. And they ain't building better networks because they want you to have good phone service. They're not building more places to store data because they want you to have higher definition YouTube access. They want your Netflix to come in at 4K. And so if it's about the Human Genome Project, like I said, then there should be some evidence of the fact that they're just going to go forward with this, even though we now have Maha in the
So this is real.
The
Trump
House.
administration just nominated Dr. Susan Menores to lead the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Here's the announcement from Donald Trump. He says, "I'm proud to announce that Dr. Susan Menores is my nominee to serve as the next director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. Dr. Menores brings decades of experience championing innovation, transparency, and strong public health systems. She has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin and postdoctoral training in microbiology and immunology at Stanford University School of Medicine. As an incredible mother and dedicated public servant, Dr. Menores understands the importance of protecting our children, our communities, and our future. Americans have lost confidence in the CDC due to political bias and disastrous mismanagement. Dr. Menores will work closely with our great Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert Kennedy Jr. Together, they will prioritize accountability, high standards, and disease prevention to finally address the chronic disease epidemic."
No, I'm not going to tell you that I think Kim Iverson is necessarily wittingly participating, but I want to point out a couple things in case they're not obvious. But number one, she's sponsored by Rumble. Number two, she has all kinds of other sponsors that are supplements that she reads on every show. Number three, she is now, remember, Rumble is an alternative website to YouTube. It's an alternative social media that has potential global reach, has an app on your phone, and she's sponsored by them. Number two, she has supplement ads. And number three, she's reading a tweet from beginning to end, which kind of suggests that, in case you're not aware, there's a lot of truth available on X. And I think that this is part of a big problem that no one seems to see. I don't use people's tweets. I'm not telling people to go to Twitter. In fact, if you follow me on X, you'll probably hate it because I only go there to annoy and only go there to make sure people realize that this whole place is a shit show. There's nothing useful here. If you start scrolling on that thing, it's just awful for you. And these people are allowed to lie to you. So even if she doesn't really understand how she is participating, she's participating. Now, is it wrong if she's a journalist to read X? I guess not. Is it wrong if she's a journalist to report with these people? No, I don't think so. But we've got to require these people to learn. So if she had me on a few days before she had Ryan Cole on, why was Ryan Cole allowed to just say he's running for governor and wasn't just asked, okay, so you're a diagnostic guy. You've done by 2022, you've done 150,000 COVID tests in your laboratory. I just had this guy on who worked for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he says that all those tests were confounding a background. What do you think about that? And so somewhere in between here, there's a fire hose of information and incoming things to do and stuff to keep straight that she's not really able to be the journalist that she probably is capable of being, simply because they keep enough balls in her hands. She's got to juggle enough things so that she's not really computing. I think that's what a lot of other people do wittingly. She's not doing it wittingly, I don't think, because when I talked to her, she was asking, she was listening, she was asking questions. I can't recommend enough. That video was great. That interview was great. It's got 160,000 views. It's not that many, but it's way more than I've ever gotten before, and we got a lot of things right on that show. So I think there's still hope. We can still stay in touch with her. I still have her contact information, but I'm trying to be careful about how I use it. But this is what I'm talking about, because she knows, she can see this coming. She's going to say it out loud. Everybody else should hear it. Why in the world are we choosing this lady to be the head of the CDC instead of dismantling the CDC? Before Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got into HHS, he was talking about taking it down to the studs. Now he's appointing... Whoops. Now he's... What? That was weird. Glitch! Let's see if I can fix that quick. Anyway, let's run this.
And make America healthy again. Okay, so most Americans have no idea who Susan Menorez is, but they should, because her resume reads like a script from a dystopian sci-fi thriller. Menorez isn't some friendly public health bureaucrat. She's not a doctor you'd see treating patients. She's a biosecurity architect, forged in the heart of the national security state. Her background isn't public health, it's biodefense, DARPA, and surveillance-era innovation. She cut her teeth in the Pentagon's inner circles, from the Department of Homeland Security to the National Nuclear Security Administration. And now she's the deputy director of ARPA-H, the newest alphabet agency you've probably never heard of, but absolutely should have. ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, was sold to the public as a cancer-fighting moonshot. Modeled after DARPA, the military's bleeding-edge innovation lab, ARPA-H...
It's funny, when he announced this, it was one of these cancer moonshots where Joe Biden actually whispered into the microphone, "They all want your data. I know what you guys want. You want their data." That's how he said it. It was really creepy.
H was billed as the place where bold, high-risk, disruptive health tech would be born. What they didn't tell you is that it would also be where tools of surveillance, behavior manipulation, and biometric control would quietly be developed, all in the name of health.
Now, health what? Health innovation, right? Because Mary Holland is also the head of Children's Health Defense, also argues regularly for health innovation that includes AI. I'm not making that up. That's real. She argues for human rights on a global scale. She argues about whether or not the WHO should have more power. These people are all enacting the same script where they have these parts to play, and they stick to that part. And if you're not aware of it, it really just seems like they're focused. But it's not focus. It is obfuscation of the truth. And even for someone like Kim Iverson, it's very hard to put it all together, because she, unlike me, has never been employed by them, worked with them, tried to convince them to understand something, never had them ask them to write her a letter or write on their behalf like I have. And so I think I have a kind of unique insight into the trap we've fallen into, especially those of us on this conservative populist right that imagined that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and ICANN and CHD were doing the best that they could to get this out without getting murdered. And it's just not true at all. Andrew Wakefield risked nothing. Polly Tommy has basically risked nothing to save any child at this point. You can't have been on 90 billboards in the UK in the early 2000s or late 90s about this issue and still be calling it health freedom or health choice. Like, it's not right. I think we can get someone like Kim Iverson to understand that fundamental problem.
You didn't vote for it. Congress didn't debate it. It was slipped into existence in 2022 with billions of taxpayer dollars and given sweeping power to partner with private industry, big tech, and the intelligence community, all while operating with minimal oversight. One of ARPA-H's flagship programs is something called DigiHeals, short for Digital Health Security. And it's not about healing. It's about securing the digital health domain. That means biometric authentication, real-time health monitoring, and integrating wearables and implants to track your vitals, your mood, and your movements constantly for your safety, of course. Another program, Nitro, which stands for Novel Innovations for Tissue Regeneration in Osteoarthritis, might sound benign, but like many ARPA-H projects, it's less about medicine and more about transforming the human body into a data-producing platform. Think neural interfaces, smart tissues, and remote regenerative tech, all managed by platforms that feed back into a centralized data system. And then there's RADx-RAD, a so-called radical diagnostics program developed during COVID and absorbed into the ARPA-H ecosystem. Its goal? To detect diseases before symptoms even appear using AI, wastewater monitoring, and passive biosurveillance. You could be flagged as a health risk before you even know you're sick. No consent required. So here's Susan Menorez speaking on DARPA TV about the use of AI and how it can accelerate health outcomes.
We think about advancing AI for healthcare in a number of different facets. So some are direct to the patients. What tools and what capabilities can we develop to help them really understand where?
So from my perspective, I had to send a message to my son. From my perspective, I feel as though it's hard to see this as just not being an announcer. If you're given a script, if someone is helping her create the script, it feels, like if you just read what you're given or you have people, producing your show. I don't know. If she writes that script, I'm impressed. If she researched that script, I'm impressed. But it feels very much like an announcement. Of course, that program's been around for years already, so it's kind of late to warn us about ARPA-H. But this lady is new, and this appointment is new, and it should reveal to everybody exactly what's going on here. How could I have known? I won't even say it. I'm not even going to say it out loud.
They are in their healthcare journey and empower them to make great decisions. We also think about AI from the provider side. So how can we help providers better understand their patients? How can we help providers optimize their time within the health system as they're seeing patients, as they're trying to make complex decisions to create the conditions for improved patient health outcomes? We also think about AI from the defensive side. So we understand that there is a great vulnerability within the health ecosystem. More and more is coming online in the Internet of Things that are going to have an incredibly positive effect, but we also know it creates vulnerabilities. And so we're using that same AI technology to help defend against those vulnerabilities, to anticipate the negative implications that are happening within the health systems, and to try to stay ahead of it.
That's so weird because I don't really understand how they can talk with such general terms and think it means anything. So in a system of wearables that doesn't really exist yet, they're worried about the security implications of those wearables. So creating the data and collecting it and storing it creates the danger. Collecting and and keeping the data creates the danger. I don't understand how they are so wonderful. I understand. I'm just marveling at how wonderful they are at skipping this really primary idea. It's crazy. Of course we have to collect the data. Of course people should have wearables and implantables. Of course they should. Of course we should build the infrastructure necessary to do it. Of course we should set up 5G towers that can transmit that much information in real. Of course we should. The only question is, what do we do about the security implications that are created by that system that we're going to set up? Okay, so I'm not going to leave this on for, this doesn't need to go on much longer. Shout out to Kim Iverson. Thank you again for that interview. I'd love to come and talk to you about Jay Bhattacharya and about what's going on, you know, give you some insight onto this. If you see this video again, just thank you very much for having me on your show. Let's go on to the next dilly dally. What would this be?
This is our cold water pressure in the kitchen.
Again, this is about the Human Genome Project.
This
so
is where I fill up water for storage.
we should see all kinds of evidence of that, right? And
flush the toilets.
So you can see the sediment.
so she barely has any water pressure. Why? Because there's a big data center in her town now, and they take all the water. And that's not a joke. That's real. Why is it because of YouTube videos? Is it to make sure that your Netflix stream is in 4K? Why are they building so many data centers? Is there that many more people watching videos than ever before? Is it because we brought the internet to Africa and now those people need their YouTube videos too? Why are they building all these data centers to the expense and the detriment of communities all over America? Why would they do that unless it wasn't about YouTube videos?
From the data center. Wow, and that's just from the water coming out of your faucet.
Yeah. And this is what's in all the pipes.
Just the well itself is probably 20,000, and that's not counting any of the
all
faucets.
The replacement
Yeah.
of the fixtures and
That's
faucets
just
and
the well.
toilets and the lines that come underneath the house. It's overwhelming because you really feel like you are up against this huge wall that you can't penetrate. There's nothing that you can do, and they don't care.
I'm here in Mansfield, Georgia, driving by Meta's new 2 million square foot data center facility. Facilities like this are being used to power things like ChatGPT and other AI tools that are becoming integrated into our daily life.
Data centers, it's going to be a very hot item.
It ain't AI. It's not to give you chatbots. Holy shit.
Stop lying!
There is no way in hell it's about AI for you and chatbots for you that we're building these giant data centers. Please understand that. That is absolutely preposterous. It's preposterous.
The entire supercomputer is built to power Grok.
We see data centers as the most exciting asset class.
Meta is building a 2 gigawatt plus data center that is so large it would cover a significant part of Manhattan.
It ain't for videos. It ain't for AI, unless you're talking about AI for medical and genetic data. That's it. The behavioral stuff, the clicking, it's all of smoke and mirrors. They are building the network that I've described earlier that they do not have yet. They are building the storage that they do not have yet for a data set that they do not know how big it is yet.
But data centers come with big costs, from light and noise pollution to the environmental impacts, to the potential rising costs of energy bills. These facilities put extraordinary demand on the power grid and require entirely new infrastructure.
Oh my God. They should be responsible for that, not us.
Search the internet for profits that Meta has made, Amazon, Microsoft. They can afford to pay for their own generation.
We came to Georgia to ask two questions. What's the true cost of the AI revolution? And who should be paying for it?
It is not the AI revolution. It is application of machine learning to giant data sets. It is not the AI revolution. It is not chatbot. It is not Grok. It is the building of the necessary infrastructure to collect the genetic and medical data of humankind and to apply a machine learning algorithm to it. And they don't have anything remotely big enough and fast enough and connected enough to do that yet. That's going to take years, and they need you to believe it's about other shit. Trust me. It's amazing right now.
Your house is here, and the data center's right there.
It's less than 400 yards.
Beverly and Jeff Morris bought their home an hour's drive from downtown Atlanta in 2016, but their roots in the community run much deeper.
Being in the country has always just been my peace and my therapy. When we found this place, we decided that this was it. It was perfect.
I was actually raised probably 5 miles from here. It felt like coming home.
Okay, so I don't need to play this very much longer. You know what's going to happen. Their groundwater is wrecked and all stolen by the guys that are running the data center that they need it for cooling. Oh, is that one? Sorry, I got to go out of here for a second. I guess I made that wrong. Yep. It's interesting, right? These people were put in place. Please remember that I'm making the argument, that, why isn't that already running? I'm making the argument that these actors were put in place to curate the narrative to make sure that any damage from transfection would be blamed effectively on a novel virus. And so here we have now, what we have is this guy, I'm going to get rid of this. We have this guy on Tucker Carlson who is going to tell us all about the spike protein as if it's 2020, and he's debating with Walter Chestnut and Jessica Rose and Kevin McCairn on a Vejan Health stream. I mean, really, it's remarkable that a guy can go on Tucker Carlson
to educate the T cells to recognize it down our organization, the BARDA, the DOD, the NIH, the NIAID, all into that room, and it was just me. And I said, it is time. It is time for me to reveal to this learned group of leaders about what I'm scared about. And I spent, I think it was 3 hours, no slides, just me speaking alone on the stage and all of them in the audience. When I first started the conversation, the first sentence was, I think COVID is oncogenic. One of the members of the audience said, that's nonsense.
I think COVID is oncogenic. And so understand my contention is that this narrative, that these people were put in place to curate a narrative about a gain-of-function virus with lots of special properties that could be like cardiac problems and any other, you know, all these stories were going around, amyloidosis, prion disease, and cancer. And they had super clowns all over the internet that were pushing these ideas, and some of those super clowns are still working hard today. This guy is mentioned in Judy Mikovitz's book. This guy took over the Winburn Cancer Center that Robert Malone helped set up. This guy is a billionaire that owns the LA Times. This is not random shit. This is your unique ability because of the biology that you've learned and the mentor change that you've been exposed to thanks to Mark Kulak and myself, that this is now ridiculously obvious. We always knew. We've listened to Tucker Carlson say it over and over again. He's lied. He'll probably lie again. He doesn't want to be a liar. He thinks it's important not to be a liar. And he has lots of these people on his show. Brett Weinstein, Robert Malone, Pierre Corey. All these people have been interviewed and stuck to the narrative of a novel virus that killed a lot of people, but we've flubbed it up. And now we've come all the way around on the hamster wheel, and we've got this guy with a very warm Captain Sulu-esque voice telling us that he always knew. He told all these guys a long time ago that it was a oncogenic virus. And so now the spike protein is gonna, oh my goodness, you know who I heard this from? Walter Chestnut told me all about P53 a few years ago, and now this guy's saying P53, so it must be true.
Stop lying!
Oh, man. It's remarkable where we are. Sorry, I gotta find that button. Did that not work? See how that works? This thing crashes every once in a while. I gotta see if I can get that going again. Current slide. That'll come in, and then maybe I can move it forward. I gotta find the spike protein.
I think everyone
part.
can understand, so I think I'm in good health. I am in very robust.
Did you have COVID?
I did.
Here we go.
How many times?
One. I never took the vaccine.
Okay.
But I got COVID, knocked me right on my butt. It was a bad 3 days. Fine. But I don't understand. You're older than I am. How did you never get, I just want to get very specific. Like, everyone on the planet got COVID.
Okay, so let me give you some idea. Okay. One, because we understand the implications. My wife, touch wood, also never got COVID because of both of us. So this is the story.
And before he starts, I just want to make sure that you understand that there were a few people in 2020 that were put in place to talk about natural immunity. And the few people that were put in place to talk about natural immunity talked about one thing in particular, and that was T-cell memory. And it was T-cell memory to other proteins in the virus that overlap with this one. For example, the N protein. And lots of people were arguing about that. There was even a leaked slide from one of these CDC presentations that talked about N protein antibodies. And so the argument is that natural immunity was a thing. And by arguing about natural immunity, what unfortunately happens is that you accept that there is a novel thing for which previous immunity could be relevant for you. And so that story is a lot more complex than they're using a background signal and misconstruing it as novel spread. But it's enticing because it kind of makes sense. And, oh, now I get it. And the really malevolent part is, ladies and gentlemen, is that I was juggling this ball in 2020 when I was still working for the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And I was trying to explain to some people on staff and on faculty about the spike protein and its unique characteristics. The same bullshit that this guy's pushing on Tucker now, 5 years later. The same guy that is cited in Judy Mikovitz's book, the same guy that took over the Cancer Institute that Robert Malone started, the same guy is connected to all of these actors and is now on the stage, the best stage of this Lollapalooza of actors, this Lollapalooza of liars, Tucker Carlson's show that gets right to the heart of the Steve Bannon populist movement, right-wing bullshit in America. It's herding cats. And this guy is helping these people to herd cats. That's why he says in this interview, the God particle a few times, as if that has anything to do with biology at all. This guy is remarkable.
Unfortunately, I relate this. It's a painful thing to me because I related to Kobe's death. It was during Kobe's time when he passed away.
Kobe, come on!
At the funeral.
Kobe Bryant, who you were close to.
Correct, very close
Oh
to.
my gosh, here we go.
And at the funeral, at his funeral, all the people in the room, and it was, I think, November, and I turned to Gavin Newsom and I said, listen, this is one virus I'm worried about because I was studying this virus.
He turned to Gavin Newsom at Kobe Bryant's funeral and said, this is one virus that I'm especially worried about that I've studied for a long time.
Stop lying! Stop lying!
I am shocked. It is just, I don't know why this thing is goofing. I'm getting a lot of goofy shit happening here. It won't queue up like I want it to queue up, dang it. I might have to redrop that in. I just can't believe it. I can't believe it. I mean, think about that statement, how many names he drops there, and also how many concepts he drops. He's trying to say that he knew that this virus was dangerous, that it was oncogenic long before he was the billionaire speaking out at Kobe Bryant's funeral.
Stop lying!
Wow.
You know, I understand HPV very well and I understand hepatitis. I said, this is not a respiratory virus. This is a dangerous virus.
It's not even a respiratory virus, he says. Holy shit.
So I went back and I shut down our organization so that we could actually do nothing else but COVID. My entire team of hundreds of scientists on Zoom and everything else around the world, I said, we must go after this virus with a vaccine that clear.
Nice. So it's February 2020. He says, I'm really afraid of this virus. I've been studying it. There you go. Busted. Busted, busted, busted. Nice work, Jason. There you go. That's all you need to see. Anybody that in February of 2020 was saying this virus and they understand it was put in place. That's exactly the same timing, exactly the same timing as a guy like James Lyon Weiner was on podcast telling everybody that he knew all about this virus. He's been studying it, you know. He knows all about, what does he call it? Antigen enhanced something something. Holy man. Can you see it? I sure hope you can, because it's not going to be this visible forever. I know that for sure.
Is the virus. And the only way to clear the virus is to have what we call a T cell and NK cell, the cells that kill.
T cells, and you must clear the virus. Already, it's like a multi-layered enchantment of bullshit. You accept the virus, you accept it's novel, you accept the mechanism of previous immunity might apply to you, it might not, and so that's a question you have to answer. It's just layer after layer of gain-of-function virus bullshit that relies on you accepting all of those premises that are all presuppose that an RNA molecule, if it has the right combination of bases, could go from a mud puddle to all the white-tailed deer in North America, kill billions and billions of people over the next 10 years. This guy is such a puppet, it's a joke.
Cancer cells. And I wrote a paper with Carl Scodone that says COVID's like cancer and cancer's like COVID. Meaning it's immune suppression that causes its spread. And it's immune suppression by the COVID virus that allows it to persist. So the only vaccine that's important.
So persistent COVID means that, again, we have a novel phenomenon. It's not chronic fatigue syndrome from having been put on a hospital ventilator. It's not chronic fatigue syndrome from having been given supplementary oxygen when it wasn't necessary. It's not chronic fatigue syndrome from being in a hospital, where that's before the pandemic, that's basically where chronic fatigue came from. Don't get hospitalized and you don't get it. Don't get vaccinated and you don't get it. Like, chronic fatigue syndrome is a strange phenomenon that before the pandemic, none other than Judy Mikovits had several reiterations of a cure for, at one point in time included being vaccinated to a mouse virus, XMRV, and that would completely make the vaccine schedule safe. That lady cites this guy in her book. Come on now.
It's a T-cell vaccine. But that's what I'm telling you. Virologists.
They had me arguing about a T-cell vaccine in 2020. They had Gerd van den Bosch out there saying there is no T-cell immunity to this virus in 2020. How is it possible that all these little rungs of the hamster wheel are coming up right in order again, other than if it is a hamster wheel? And every time the wheel turns, you think you're becoming more familiar with reality, when in reality, you're becoming more familiar with the wheel.
Think about antibodies versus cellular therapy. It's foreign to them to have a vaccine that stimulates T cells. So I said, I understand that internally.
It's a little weird since in 20 minutes
It's just so dumb because you can't get antibodies without stimulating T cells unless the basic map of the immune system is completely bunk, which I'm open to. But if you accept what most textbooks, what most summaries of the immune system say, you can't get to antibodies as a model of immunity without activating the T cells that are upstream from the B cells. So this whole concept of a T-cell vaccine is...
Stop lying!
It's just nonsense. And it's bullshittery because they were talking about this shit in 2020. Somebody even asked me if we should start a company that made T-cell vaccines. I shit you not.
You explained it to me, not particularly high IQ, not a scientist. I understand exactly what you're saying. Why isn't it obvious to virologists? Why isn't that like day one lesson in virology school that the T cells, that the cells that protect you against all potential internal harm, they're the key?
Because every vaccine so far is antibody-based. Dogma.
And he smiles, and now Fauci bad, and here we go with now a dumb, simple, and stupid, complicated explanation for his magic that uses the word bioshield and all this other crap. And they're going to talk about how the spike protein is oncogenic and hits the P53 gene and yada, yada, yada. It's all nonsense. It's all a pre-written script that people like Jessica Rose, people like Walter Chestnut, people like Kevin McCairn, all these people, Richard Fleming, the list is almost endless of people that were seeded this narrative. Wittingly or unwittingly, they did podcasts about it. They thought they had added to their knowledge, and they went and argued about it. And most of them should know by now that this is just ridiculous. I mean, even if you go on Twitter right now, you can find someone named Walter Chestnut who posted today a whole series of tweets about how the spike protein is a unique agonist for nicotinic receptors. What I did my PhD on. The whole problem with that is that where is this high fidelity spike protein coming from? What is producing it? Why is it still here? Even if the original spike protein found in Wuhan, reported by Shengxi Li, was a spectacular stimulator of the nicotinic receptors in our lungs, it is impossible that that same spike protein would be here now if its transmission mechanism is RNA. It's impossible. And yet we're to believe that. These people all believe it. He believes it. The other thing that he is transforming us into believing, infecting us into believing, bamboozling us into believing, with slave speak, is that the mRNA vaccines, the mRNA transfections that were put in us, reliably produce a high fidelity protein that has all these beautiful, attributes. It's folded correctly. Oh my gosh, it works great. It's like perfect. So the idea that transfection works is accepted. The idea that it's a gain-of-function virus that can cause cancer, accepted. The idea that PCR tests for this virus, accepted. The idea that they have millions of sequences of this virus, accepted. That's the whole effect of such a bullshit show that was just put on last week. How is it possible that we are here? Other than by malevolent design, we are being slow-rolled into this trap because it's about the Human Genome Project. It's for all the marbles. It's for our grandchildren. They need them to accept this narrative, this biology, this bullshit, this cocked up response to a pandemic, this screwed up administration, this revaluing gold or canceling the national debt or some other thing that will crash the dollar. Or ladies and gentlemen, your grandchildren are about to be enslaved, and if you don't wake up to it right now, it's going to happen. You've got to understand that there is such a difference between injection and ingestion that it's almost absurd that we have ever been able to be led to believe that intramuscular injection is medicine in some cases. I cannot find, no one has presented me with evidence that there is an example of that. After almost a year and a half of saying it, the only thing they have at every pharmaceutical company that's ever made a protein biologic that for everyone from Jonathan Engler to Mike Eden could have explained to you in 2020 because they worked for pharmaceutical companies is recombinant genetics, synthetic recombinant genetics. What does this mean in layman terms? It means that they can make a lot of quantities of pure DNA, and they can use it for things. They can transform stuff, they can transfect things, and in theory, using a simple enzymatic reaction, they could make a lot of pure RNA, or almost pure RNA. That's it. And it's not a new technology. It's not something they had to figure out. They have been trying and trying and trying to make it cheaper and better for 20 years. It is the heart of the sequencing reaction. PCR is the heart of all of this stuff, including the diagnostics that are fraud. And even if there are applications where PCR works as a diagnostic, the rigorous requirements for that to happen were not met by any of the EUA products that defined this pandemic and hid the murder behind fraud. And so a synthetic recombinant pure signal in quantity, meaning a lot of it, you don't even need this much, could have been seeded in Wuhan and anywhere else they wanted to find it as evidence of a spread. If that synthetic recombinant pure signal overlapped in any way with an existing background, then that means that it would have been so simple for them to misconstrue spread. Now, why would they seed such a crazy narrative? Well, because transfection was never going to make it through the FDA. Transfection and a personalized application of it to you was never going to make it through the FDA. So they needed to get transfection past the FDA, kind of like grandfathered in, because we used it and it seems to have worked. So why reevaluate it anymore? And that's where we are. They got there with a very simple trick. They just put out a lot of placebos. In fact, the more I think and read and reevaluate, it seems very likely that the criminal vaccine schedule in America, where you have like 70 doses before you're 18 if you follow the recommendations, cannot be all live doses, or we wouldn't have any kids anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, I really think they're lying to us about so much. If you want to start somewhere neutral, start with the word endemic and understand that an RNA molecule cannot go from a single good copy with some magic parts to endemic. It's not possible. Endemicity of a molecule is just not possible. Ladies and gentlemen, they misconstrued a background by using nonspecific tests. RNA cannot pandemic. You want to know the truth? Intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfection was always a crime. And the population pyramid problem needed managing, and they did it. That's what they did it. They're still doing it. Thank you very much for being here. Like I said, Monday we're gonna bring a new level to this. We're starting Biology 101. I'm really excited. I'm really happy about this plan to move forward. It's gonna be a lot of development. It's gonna be some study halls to start. I want to bring everybody up to speed in kind of in a good way. I don't want to just start, here it is. I think it's good for us to all, come down out of this mist together. And so I don't want anybody to feel like you're being yanked out of a moving truck. I want you to feel like, you're being welcomed into somebody's home. I think that's the way we should do it. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for all of your support, the people that subscribe, the people that give one time, the people that send brisket. I'm actually about to go up and eat some of that right now, I think. I don't know, the books, the $10 bills. Thank you very much for all of this. And we're not making a killing here. I don't want you to feel bad for us, but my accountant felt bad for us because this is our worst year during the pandemic. And technically speaking, he said we now are living below the poverty line. So hey, putting it all on the line for the truth of biology. I hope that Monday, the start of Biology 101 will change some people's mind about support. And maybe soon we can organize something where a nonprofit can start to produce a textbook or produce a curriculum and a textbook. Again, thank you very much for being here. Trying my best. See you soon.